Okay, we're back on. I have one last question about MASH. I wanted to ask, was Houlihan unique in television at the time as a strong female character?
She was. She was unique at that time and in her time, which was the 50s when it was really happening. She was unique straight through, and she became even more unique, I think, because we allowed her to continue to grow. That was the most unique part. We watched her evolve. I don't think that's ever been done in quite that way on what was labeled a sitcom, because there was no other word for it. I never think of MASH as a sitcom. Well, first of all, I don't love the word, but it contained too much. MASH was MASH. If there was a category, it was MASH. But we had to be put somewhere, so we were called a comedy. But there were times, as you know, if you were watching it consistently, that you would cry more than you would laugh.
Were you being recognized for that? That you had this character, the strong female character that you didn't really see in television?
I think so, yes. I think so. You're asking this question coming off of a weekend that I spent in Palm Beach talking to a group of nurses and giving out awards, and getting an award too. But I mean, I'm invited to graduating classes, to speak at graduating classes. I've done promos about nursing because you may not know it, we're in the middle of a nursing crisis. When the baby boomers move on, we are all in very deep trouble. I think we're in deep trouble now. There are no caregivers out there. We don't pay them enough. We don't recognize them at all, and they're on overload, burnout, and we're going to be in very deep trouble very shortly unless people start to take hold of the problem. So I've done promos about this. So yes, I think so. As recently as this weekend, I was out there being recognized as this character. The nurses call me their pinup girl, their calendar girl, because she made a very strong statement, not only for the profession, but for women in the military. I have been invited to Washington to, when we broke ground for their monument, I was there talking about them and what they did. And it's time they were recognized.
Okay, during the run of MASH, you kept busy on television.
Sure.
And particularly in variety shows.
Oh, yes,
some of the things you did?
Oh, gosh, well, they were really fun. I did a lot of work with Bob Hope and Perry Como, Tony Orlando and Dawn, and Sonny Bono, and all the, there was this wonderful period of time where every summer you would get this terrific variety of variety shows to guest star on, and I've always loved dancing and singing and doing musicals, so it was a terrific time for me. And it was fun to break out of the bondage of fatigue green, which is so difficult, and wear all the kind of spangles and, you know, do something so completely far afield from Margaret Houlihan. It was just, it was great times we had. Perry Como did Better in the Bahamas, so I got to go to the Bahamas with him and the captain and Tennille, and I know it was just a wonderful, wonderful time.
Did you consider doing After MASH, the series that followed?
No, I didn't. I had a contract elsewhere anyhow. I did a wonderful pilot, which for some reason they didn't know what to do with. It was called Sam. It was so good. John J. O'Connor in the New York Times did a big picture, and he's not even a television critic, he's a theater critic, and said, why isn't this on the air? I loved it, and it was so funny and real, and you know, and it was wonderful, but there was just kind of, I guess, no place for it at that time. I think my time for doing another series came and went without my being able to do anything about it when I did Cagney and Lacey. I think if I had been allowed to leave the series, I would have done Cagney, because I loved the character. It was another strong woman, and I thought the audience really liked seeing me in uniform and portraying these women who were doing breakthrough jobs. And I enjoyed playing those, you know.
How did that project come to you, Cagney and Lacey?
The normal way. The producers came and said, "Would love for you to do this role. Would you read it and think about it?" You know, they had been trying. First they tried to do it as a feature, and I just couldn't get it done. I think they could now, or something of that ilk could be done now. And you know, I read it. I helped rewrite some of it, actually, some things that after I started to research, I would have liked to put in about her. In fact, Dick O'Neill, who got to play Cagney's father in the series, called me one day and he said, "I just found out I have you to thank for my role." And I said, "How's that?" He said, "They told me that you wrote the background, the story about her, and you talk about your father and your brothers." And I said, "It's true. It's a true story." And he said, "Well, I love doing it, and we were, she just wasn't as explained enough for the audience for me." And I said, "I want to talk about her background and how she came to be attracted to being a policewoman." Sorry.
As the established star coming in, were you involved in the casting process as well?
Only in that I really kind of went to bat for Tyne. I wanted her to, I thought she'd be a good sidekick for Cagney, and she was a friend, and so I really kind of asked for her. I held out for her. They wanted some other people who were wonderful, you know. I did that, yes. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of other kinds of research did you do for the role in terms of the police?
Oh, lots. And I really enjoyed it. I guess I found a whole different way of relating to guns. I worked at what do you call it? Can't think.
Firing range?
The firing range. They have no name for it. But anyway, I worked there, and the challenge, of course, becoming that you're competing with yourself and your own accuracy and your own. So it took a different meaning for me, and I worked with a lady who had served on the force for a long time, and I worked with a rookie. So I had two wonderful different perspectives, and I modeled a lot of my character after this policewoman who worked in NYPD, and she had a gun holder on her ankle. She wore one in the back of her trousers, just stuck in, plus the regular gun in a holster, probably here. That's where I wore mine. I can't remember where she wore hers, but I learned all the reasons about that. And when we were shooting, and I was rehearsing shooting the villain who was coming at me, he was a big man, Ben Hammer, big man, and he was holding something, some kind of club thing. He was coming at me with such force and energy that I knew my gun, one shot from my gun, was not going to stop him, and that I needed to protect myself more than that. And so we had discussions about this, because at that point in time, you needed to get permission from the network to first of all, I'm the female, I've got a gun, and I'm shooting at somebody. This already is way out there. And I told the producers and the director that in order to believe this, if I'm not going to have an elephant gun, I'm going to have to shoot him a couple of times until he falls, because it won't be enough it'll look phony if I shoot him and he falls. He was big, he was strong, and he was on a fall towards me, you know, and he wasn't going to stop. And so they went through the whole process and came back and said, the network said, you're probably right, and they're gonna let you do it. The original script had the cavalry coming in to help her. And I said, you know, okay, but you know, I've done all the work so far. I get my opportunity to apprehend this man, and I'm right here, and I don't see why I should be rescued. I am not a damsel in distress. I have 3 guns, you know, whatever. But, you know, they saw my point, and they worked it out.
Was it a considerable fight, though, to get those extra shots in? Was it
well,
a censorship issue?
Violence, and here was the female character. Sure, I mean, I see their point, but if you're going to do it to begin with, if you've said, yes, we're going to do this character, you must let the actor do the character so that it's believable. The opening had me getting into my police uniform at some guy's house where I've spent the night to establish, it was served the story, established her as a single girl who kind of behaved like a guy. She leaves him saying, I'll call you. And this was a big deal, and it was funny. But a police woman would never have her uniform. She would have left that in the locker, and she would be in civilian clothes. So it was a liberty they took, and I told them about it. I said, you're going to get a laugh on that, but it's an expensive laugh. She wouldn't have the uniform, and they said, we're going to, you know, theatrical license, we're going to try to make this work so that we establish her, and, you know, you have just so much time to do that establishing. And sure enough, when we ran it for a bunch of women cops, they did laugh. They said, that's wrong, we know it. We just needed to take that liberty, you know. But the research was fascinating and interesting. I'm a big fan of cops. I love cops the way I love nurses. They are our sheroes. They really are.
Another project you did around this time is the feature film S.O.B.
Yeah, yes.
What character did you play in that movie?
Well, she was actually, Polly was her name, but she was a conglomeration of a couple of different characters, more than a couple, that really were real, that Blake kind of put together in one package for this character. But that was divine. I mean, you were working with some extraordinary people in the business, legends, if you will. I mean, Blake and Julie, Robert Preston and Bill Holden, who's a sweetheart. We had a wonderful friendship. We loved gin rummy, so we played gin rummy, and they were all such great raconteurs. People would go to the set. Richard Mulligan, of course, was a very dear friend that I had worked with before. And we would sometimes just go to the set to hang around if we were not working, because it was just like going to a party. It was wonderful to sit around with those people and listen to them, you know, tell stories and talk about experiences in the business. And, you know, I mean, just the people they knew and they worked with, and I don't know, it was quite something. And we had a lot of fun on the movie. I loved working with Blake. He loves actors. Golly, he just loves actors. And he had a monitor, and he would let you see the scene right away. And he said to me once, if I see that you're laughing at yourself, I know that we've got it, you know, because you don't really, you're removed, you know, is that funny? But if you crack up, then, you know, like the scene with Gary Berghoff that I was telling Larry Gelbart about, then you know, when you see the camera operator is shaking the camera and they have to cut it and he's laughing so hard, you know you've hit a homer, you know, this is working, everybody's laughing. And so, but my first shot was off camera, but I thought I'd start rehearsing, you know, getting into her, and then I looked over at Blake, and we were setting up for another shot. I went over to him and I said, "Is there anything you would like to tell me about her, talk to me about her?" You know, he said, "I was watching you, and if that was just off camera, you're gonna be fine," you know. And we, of course, we became great friends. Blake and Julie would sometimes have maybe a half hour of rushes, and would go over to their house and watch the rushes. And of course, his Pink Panther stories are legion and funny. But I have some terrific photographs of me as Polly with the body cast, which had to be put on the right way every day. By the way, Blake insists on stuff like that, and I had to be cut out of it every day. But there's a whole way of behaving in the real thing that you know, you don't have to act when you have it on, and it was great fun. Going to the lavatory was an experience with this body cast, but I have pictures of me lying on the stretcher with the body cast, so hysterical, and Blake straight-faced telling me a joke, and I'm totally out of control, losing it. It was not a job. It was just a great vacation with so many laughs and so many good times. And of course, working with some of my dear friends, you know, Richard Mulligan was just a joy as a human being and as a colleague.
Okay, let me ask you about the television movie Games Mother Never Taught You. What was it about?
It was about a woman who was the first female executive in a company, a marketing advertising company, and she went from executive assistant to this position because her employer, her immediate superior, recognized her potential and was willing to take a chance. And it was an interesting thrust because it revealed a lot about her husband as well, who was Sam Waterston. It doesn't get better than that. And Sam played my husband, and he was an artist. And when I approach him about taking the job, we have to relocate to New York, and it means he loses his tenure. So now he also is an artist as well as a teacher. He wants to try the New York scene. He says, "We moved here for my career, and now we're going to move there for yours." And he really means it, and they have a good marriage, a wonderful marriage, and they love each other. But when I start to become very successful and his work doesn't really take off, he starts to resent the time I have away from him. And little by little, they begin to crumble, or at least he begins to separate. When he comes back, he does leave. When he comes back, there's this wonderful scene, that wonderful speech that Sam handled so beautifully. As a point of view, it's a confession. He admits that he felt supportive and he wanted to be supportive, but somewhere he didn't think I was going to quite succeed the way I did. And when that happened and he didn't, he pulled back. But once he faced that and dealt with it, he was now back and everything was going to be okay. But it was just a very interesting revelation about both of them. But that he could come to grips with that, it was very heavy, and he handled it beautifully. It was wonderful. It was just a very good movie. And Lee Phillips directed it, and he was just so good. God, he was so into that movie, every page. And another great actor turned director who loved actors and knew the problems of actors. It's wonderful, like Gene Saks, who's a wonderful actor, and I'm sure Sidney Pollack, with whom I've never had the pleasure to work, but he's such a great actor. Of course, he's a great director. I mean, he loves actors. He knows what to go for, and so when the camera's on him, he's terrific, you know.
How was that movie received, Games Mother Never Taught You?
Oh, it won all kinds of awards. It was did very well, received very well. And I'm glad, because it was a great movie. It had just wonderful performances, and Joanna Lee did I'm Lee Phillips. I'm getting my directors mixed up. Lee Phillips did such a wonderful job, and there was not a choice, but there were two. There were two projects that came out for my consideration at the same time, and I'm so glad that I went with Games. And I think it's one of my favorite, if not the favorite, television movie that I did. It had just a lot of good stuff, and a lot of good memories too.
Okay, I'd like to ask just about a few other projects you worked on. You worked on a show called Miracle at Moreau.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, we shot that in Montreal, and it was supposed to be, I think, the Pyrenees, but it was the story of this wonderful nun who saves the life of these little Jewish children because their guide, who's taking them to Spain, gets caught and shot by the Nazis, and she's in this sort of convent school high up in the mountains, very removed from the war. Not that she doesn't know what's going on, but her children are somewhat removed, and the most adult of them is not exposed enough to know that the lies that were being told about Jewish people or Jewish children are lies, and she fights her as the only kind of adult child. She fights the decision because she thinks it's going to get them all killed. And what it is fear. And at one point, my character, the nun, actually slaps her, and this is so dazzling, you know, for a nun to allow this behavior to come out. And but it's a beautiful film. I've been to this. It was a terrific idea. This synagogue invited me to come, and they ran the film. They had me speak about it, and it said so much about human beings, and how, I guess my favorite thing is there was no difference. I was in the synagogue waiting to find out what was different, and I've never really seen any difference in the religions. Everybody is looking for a higher power, and there is one, and we're all worshiping that or praying to that higher power to keep us in a place where we know the difference between what's right and wrong, or good or bad, and to lead the best lives we know how. And so I think that movie kind of contained all that stuff, and it was a good shoot. We had the children were wonderful, and I enjoyed that very, very much, playing that character. Another kind of very strong woman in her way, in every way.
There was an IBM commercial that you did with the MASH cast.
Mm-hmm.
Was this the first time that you had all gotten together professionally?
Well, we weren't all together. We were not all there. Initially, it was Wayne and Gary and myself, and then I think they brought in Larry, and then Alan came in. And we weren't often all together shooting them. They were, like Wayne and I did one together, I think, and I don't remember what the sequence was, but was Harry in that? Do you remember? But no, it probably was not the first time we were all together, because we really kind of stayed in touch and stayed together, and sometimes you have to make an effort because of the nature of the industry, and you're flying here and flying there, and you're never shooting in town, and you're so seldom in town, so you do kind of try to make the effort. Like Christmases, I try to be with the Farrs because it's warm and wonderful. My mother adores Jamie, and it's one of the few places she wants to be on Christmas, and it's the only place she wants to be on Christmas. And they give a wonderful intimate party, and they're wonderful hosts, and it's like being, with my family. So I'm not sure if it might have been the first time that we worked together, some of us. We did do a Dick Van Dyke show where they tried to bring a lot of MASH people together. Sally was there with me, and Elliot Gould, and Bill Christopher, Jamie. I'm trying to remember who else did that. I think maybe Larry, but anyway, they brought some the as many MASH people as they could sort of get into the roles, and because we were in a hospital situation.
Okay, just a couple more. There's a television movie called A Killer Among Us. Sorry, A Killer Among Friends.
Yes.
With Patty too.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little about that experience.
Anna Banana. Patty's real name is Anna, and she has a legitimate thing about wanting to be called by her rightful name. We became great buddies. She's a delicious lady. She's wonderful. And she had a brand new puppy, which is, of course, my thing. And so when she was doing a scene, I was babysitting this new puppy, and vice versa. It was kind of a difficult shoot based on a true story, a horrendous story. And these children, these were teenagers who killed their classmate. It was a terrible true story, and Patty played the mother, and I played another detective who finds out who did it. And what made her even more interesting was working with Patty's character, who was determined to do police work on her own and was just going to get into trouble. And so my scenes with Patty were mostly admonishing her, you got to get out of here. I'm doing my job, and you have to trust me, and so forth. But all my kind of research and police work, I had even gone to school but anyway, there was one place where I went to Charlie, the director, to ask him if he would put me in the funeral scene or the wake or someplace like that. And I said, you don't have to give me any lines or anything, but just like pan across me to make sure you see that I'm there, because my research from another movie tells me that this is absolutely de rigueur. There will be somebody, if not more than one person, representing the force at this site, at this location. And so he said, okay, that's interesting. And he called production company, and they called the lady I was playing in real life, the real detective, and she said, you know, Loretta did her research. She's absolutely right. I was at the funeral and I was at the wake. And yes, that's one of the things we always do. And so he did put it in.
Okay, we're at the end of our tape there.